Good day, everyone. Welcome to the third day of the Indigenous Awareness Week at TRU. What a wonderful opportunity for those of you who are coming together for the first time to increase your educational knowledge and awareness on topics such as truth and reconciliation. What does land entitlement mean? For me, as a Secwepemc woman living in unceded territory, it means there's still a challenge before us and our future generations to build a stronger foundation with the different levels of government, in particular Government of Canada. As we move forward learning about truth and reconciliation, let's let those seeds be planted and nurtured so that our circle of knowledge that is inclusive of elders in our community to impart and share their wisdom, not only around the history of our land, but what the land offers. Mother Earth is a beautiful, beautiful mother that gives us the water that we drink, the opportunity to do of our physical self, but our spiritual and emotional self. Let us be strong in our circle of support and be inclusive of those that really need us, and be given of heart and spirit. I thank you for this opportunity to share in this short time with you, and I wish you continued success as you move forward in your educational endeavors. Be strong, be safe, take care. Cookstrom, thank you.
All right, Cookstrom, Elder Doe, for starting us off in a good way this morning for Indigenous Awareness Week. Hello, everybody. Hadit. My name is Teresa John. I am Dakas, or carrier from the Northern Interior of BC. I'm a member of the Frog Clan, and I attended TRU Law School from 2017 to 2020, and further was a storyteller for 1 year for the Faculty of Student Development. My pronouns are she and her. Today we're going to be talking about conversations about land acknowledgement, and today this conversation is taking place in Tecumseh to Secwepemc, the unceded territory of the Secwepemc Nation. First off, I'd like to go around the virtual room today and do a round of introductions. So Tina, if you can start off, that would be great.
Cookstretchum, Teresa, and a big Cookstretchum to Elder Doe from Tecumseh to Secwepemc for providing us with such a beautiful welcome to beautiful Tecumseh to Secwepemc territory, where I too am located in Sun Rivers. And yeah, so Waitap, Tina Matthew, and Squest, Sink Tista Aquin. I'm from Sink First Nation, which is an hour from Kamloops, and we like to say it's an hour drive in the car, or 2-day horseback riding, or one day canoe journey from Kamloops. So as I look at the window at Tecumseh to Secwepemc, where the waters meet, you know, this is an important meeting place. So I'm really, really happy that we're able to share some information with you today. And so I'm the Executive Director in the Office of Indigenous Education, and I would like to say a very big thank you to the chiefs and elders and leaders and all of the students that have joined us here today. And a very big thank you to Alicia for organizing us and bringing us together to be able to share this information. So Indigenous Awareness Week, there's been a number of events happening, and I'm super excited to see this workshop being offered for everybody. So I hope you enjoy yourself today. Cookstretchum, and welcome.
Thank you. Robbie, do you want to go next?
Sure. Cookstrom for having me on. Tansi Waitap. I'm Robbie Davey, and I work at Career and Experiential Learning on campus in the Department of the Faculty of Student Development. So my role is to, I guess, it's multifactorial, but just to work on creating more spaces for students to develop employment skills while they're at TRU. I am also located in Kamloops, and my background is my mom is Métis from the Red River Valley, so I come from that area. My dad is also English settler background, so I grew up in the Lower Mainland, and then I find myself in Kamloops, which our family doesn't have any connection to, but my mom's family moved to Prince George, so we have a connection to that land. So I see nods from Teresa. But yeah, so that's a little about me, and I can bring the Métis perspective to this conversation. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Great. All the way to Flight Litany in Prince George. Good to know. Dana, do you want to go next?
Hello, liked. My name is Jana. I'm joining in here, bringing perhaps a student's perspective of territorial acknowledgements in the area. I am Cree from Onion Lake, Saskatchewan. It borders it straddles the borderline of Alberta and Saskatchewan. Although I was raised on my dad's reserve in Cook's Ferry in Spence's Bridge of the Inklakopum territory. So I completed the second half of my undergrad at Thompson Rivers University. I did the first half at UNBC up in Teresa's neck of the woods. But I've also lived in Kamloops now for nearly 10 years, and I'm finishing my second degree at TRU and preparing to make my journey back to Treaty 6 this summer. Thank you for having me.
Great. Thanks for joining us. Next, please.
Sorry, you cut out there. Were you asking for me to proceed?
Yes.
Yes. White up. When Jetchqua, Willie Sellers, Cook beat the Geckle. Hello, everyone. Chief Willie Sellers with the Williams Lake First Nation. Also, TRU alum. Very honored and welcome to be here. I'd like to thank the elder for opening us up in a good way. It's little things like that and little things like land acknowledgements that really, fill those voids and contribute to that reconciliation discussion. So looking forward to the dialogue today.
Great. Thanks for joining us today. And finally, Kristen.
Sign seat Kristen Johnny, Sajkotin Dini, Tlarinkotin. Afternoon, everybody. My name is Kristen Johnny. I am from the Chilcotin Nation, specifically Anaheim Band, which is located an hour west of Williams Lake. I am the coordinator of Indigenous Student Services for the Williams Lake campus, so I am in Williams Lake. I did majority of my education with TRU, so I did start at TRU in Williams Lake. I did my business management certificate here, and then I did the business management diploma in Kamloops, and then I laddered into my Bachelor of Business Administration, where I got a marketing major and a finance minor. After that, I did a little bit of work with my band, and I got a professional Aboriginal economic developer certification as well. So once I kind of finished that, I ended up going back to school at TRU and got my graduate diploma in business administration. So I did majority of my schooling with TRU, and yeah, looking forward to the discussions today.
Great. Thank you guys all for joining us today. So as I said before, I was a storyteller when I was at TRU and working with the great Alicia Ashcroft. And near the end of my term of being a storyteller, after spending a significant amount of time in the Secwepemc territory, being a visitor and spending lots of time in the gathering place, utilizing services, meeting other students, attending Soup Circle, meeting with elders, I really got to familiarize myself with the area, and I had noticed a lot of common themes with land acknowledgement. And when I went home to my home territories in Saikas First Nation, Nakasley First Nation, in Dakaf country, I pondered the question about land acknowledgements and the significance it has to Indigenous peoples. So I posed this question to family members, friends, colleagues, to understand the different perspectives that they hold. A common value between all of the responses were respect and protection of the land. And we heard this morning from our elder Doe, who had said, Mother Earth is a really beautiful thing, and it encompasses so much within us, and what we do to the earth immediately comes back and affects us. And so when I wrote the blog, I had this all in mind, and especially with all of the natural resources and the things that we have to face with mining, forestry, how our water is being impacted. How is that significant when we do our land acknowledgements before Soup Circle, before big events, before on the first day of classes, on orientation week? How does that make it more meaningful? How can we teach people about this acknowledgement and how it stems back to all of those factors and all of those living beings, being the water, the trees, the rocks, all of those are living beings, and how is that significant? How does those valued things in our lives come into the classroom, come into the institution? So just to start off easy, for our first question is, why do we offer land acknowledgements? So I will put Tina on the hot seat for the first one, and we'll just go around in a circle. Feel free to jump in whenever you feel, and we'll start off with that. Thanks, Tina.
Thanks, Teresa. I was thinking about land acknowledgements, and I think it's the highest form of respect we can show to our hosts. Like, even though I'm from Sink, whenever I'm in someone else's territory, I always acknowledge the territory, our hosts, where I find myself. And, I think it's a verbal agreement for people saying that I will conduct myself respectfully in this territory. It's people acknowledging that the Indigenous, the original people who inhabited that territory or that area. And it's one of the protocols that Indigenous people that we do, that we've always done, is acknowledging the space where we find ourselves and paying respect to the hosts who are allowing us in that territory. If you think about Secwepemc people, we were always clear in our intentions. If we're traveling through someone else's territory, there's different color armbands that we would wear to show our intention, to show that we're there in peace, or to make clear why we are in that space. If we're hunting or fishing or gathering medicines, we obtain permission from the chief to be in that area. And if whatever we gather, we give part of that back to the community, and that goes to elders and single mothers, for people who can't, gather for themselves, who can't hunt. And so it's that reciprocity piece, giving back, and always, giving thanks for the space that we're in, and giving thanks back to the community. So, yeah, I think being clear with our intentions is really important. And when people do a territorial acknowledgement, it's not rote. It's coming from the heart and showing that respect, and that you're aware of your obligations too. I was thinking about, in the Lower Mainland, because I lived in Vancouver for over 20 years, and, they talk a lot about, people coming in and showing their intentions. If you're coming in a canoe, you're showing your paddle, so people can see where you're from. You can see by the colors and the designs on the paddle where people are from. And also, when you come in, you're coming in with your canoe face backwards, and you're showing your back, which is vulnerable, right? But if you come in with your bow forward and paddles down, that means you're saying you're coming in, you're coming for war, you're coming to fight. So I always think about that, like, how are we presenting ourselves, and why are we in that space, and how are we showing to our hosts that we're going to be respectful? So, yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Tina. A lot of great points that you brought up there. I really liked how you elaborated on bringing your intentions forward, and those must be clear and very specific. I hear about stories where they say the trees will even tell on you. So even, the elements know your intentions, and it's always good to be specific and be prepared to reciprocate and give thanks. Thank you. Does anybody want to volunteer, or should I pick on somebody? Robbie.
Sure, I can go next. So was there a question, or should I just...
Yeah, you can feel free to jump in, but the question was, why do we offer land acknowledgements?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, my perspective is a little bit different, and I'm aware that I'm always a guest wherever I am, because the tie to the land that I have, it would be in Manitoba. So, and as Métis people, we were just, there's a big diaspora for us. So the people who are in BC, not really attached to the original place where we tie ourselves back to. So I'm just struck by recently how people are very concerned about doing a land acknowledgement and doing it correctly. So there's hesitations, I think, in some cases. I think there are some cases in the news recently about boards and just settlers not understanding what the purpose is and not coming from the heart because they don't understand the reason for the land acknowledgement. So I think sessions like this are really important because I don't think that people are aware also of the difference between treaty lands and unceded lands, which we're on unceded lands, which would mean that the land was never ceded to settlers to stay. So I think those kinds of things are important to acknowledge and to understand for people who are here. Yeah, I just think it's an interesting conversation. I think there's a lot of discussion around whether or not people should be doing those land acknowledgements, when they do them, and who does them. So if there isn't an Indigenous person in the room, do they always do them if it's an Indigenous person in the room, like for example a board meeting? So I think a lot of those questions can be answered with a simple search and even a request. And there's a lot of documentation on what land acknowledgements to use. TRU has come up with quite a few for all the different campuses that they're on. So, and those can be located too. My perspective is just that, I know I'm not on the land that I come from. My mom moved away from that land, so we have always been sort of not in the area that we're from. So, we comport ourselves with care and acknowledge whose land we're on. That's all I have to say.
Great, thanks. So a lot of great points that you brought up there, Robbie. Thank you so much for your for speaking. I really like that you brought up people not knowing the difference between treaty and unceded lands. So that's one thing about BC that makes us unique, is that we don't have a lot of treaties. We have Treaty 8, and then the Second people also have a treaty as well. So that's in northern BC, but majority of our province is all unceded for the most part. And so I really enjoyed that you said that a lot of the land acknowledgement is not coming from the heart a lot of the times. So that's why I think it's really important to remember all of the elements in Mother Earth and realize that there's a lot of hurt going on in our communities, and as a result of a lot of this resource extraction and such. So with the hesitation, always ask questions, always ask someone you trust. Asking questions is really important in that regard, definitely. So thank you. We'll move on to Willie Sellers.
Thank you. Very good points. In my perspective and just how I've learned and been mentored over the years on the importance of the land acknowledgement to honor the First Nations that you're residing on or operating on. I mean, a big part of it is a part of that reconciliation discussion, a part of the healing process of what reconciliation actually is. I grew up on reserve, raised by a non-First Nation mom who was a bit behind teaching the culture and the tradition and the language to me and my siblings, but she did her best, and as I grew up in that world and grew up in the community, land acknowledgements weren't something that ever did happen, or that you could hold up in the traditional territory that you're in. I remember I wrote the book Dip Knitting with Dad, for example, and we were doing, that first year we did 8 weeks of touring over 70 schools, over 100 presentations, and every single district that we went to was different in how they handled that land acknowledgement and how that First Nation liaison liaised with the different schools throughout that territory. But one thing that really stands out in my mind, and I've told this story a number of times, was we went to a French immersion school in the Lower Cowichan, and our handler, as we called him, he would bring us in and he would sing this welcoming song every single presentation that we did, and he would speak the language and he would sing the song to every single one of these schools. And this is a French immersion school that we're at. There wasn't a single First Nation kid in the school, but that French immersion school sang that welcoming song word for word. And like, as a First Nation person, as a First Nation leader now, looking back at that, I mean, like, I get tingles just thinking about it. You hold up First Nations by doing the land acknowledgement, and that's not something that historically has ever been done, but it's contributing to the healing process in each and every single First Nation person in each and every single region and community by doing that. It's one small thing, but it really does mean a lot for all of us to do that and honor the First Nations who were here since time immemorial. So with me, it's reconciliation. It's a part of the healing process, and it's something that is definitely needed and welcomed in every single one of our territories.
Great, thank you so much. I really enjoy that you said it contributes to our healing process, and it's an important part of the truth and reconciliation efforts by everybody in Canada. And that brings me back to the purpose of it coming from the heart and how that's really important. Kristen, why do you think we offer land acknowledgements?
From my perspective, I believe it's honor and respect for the people whose place you're at, whose land you're at. And, I actually had the honor of going back east when my nation went through the Supreme Court and got our land and title and rights, the first in the world. And it was an honor to witness that. And, I didn't actually get to go on the bus that went from Williams Lake and drove all the way to Ottawa, but just hearing their stories when I got there, like I got there the day before the Supreme Court, I stayed there the day of, and I went back to Williams Lake the day after. But just talking to them and hearing their stories, like of all the different First Nations lands and how welcoming all of them were, like they were just, it was awesome. Like they gave them feasts, like they did all of this. They gave them gifts. Like by the time they got from Williams Lake to Ottawa, they had I think they said they almost doubled their suitcases. Like they had so much gifts from all these people, all these First Nations that welcomed them in, that just, fed them and, telling them, how proud they are of our nation because of how far, we brought people. And, it was so amazing. And it's just that honor and that respect when it comes down to it. It's just the honor and the respect. So just hearing all of that, and then actually participating the night of after the Supreme Court, we had a potluck celebration, and just hearing people talking from different parts of Canada, of the world, just talking about our case specifically, but not only that, but what it means to them, right? And it's just at the end of the day, it's honor and respect for the people that are on the land that you're on.
Thank you, Kristen. That's so amazing that you were able to go to Ottawa and attend the landmark decision of the Chilcotin people getting title of their lands, which was, yes, the first one in Canada. Really awesome. Honor and respect is very important. I definitely agree. That's so amazing. 2014, that was already, some time ago. So yeah, looks good for the future. And also, with the Truth and Reconciliation coming in and the 94 recommendations the year after that, some important steps being taken forward. Jana, why do you think we should offer land acknowledgements?
We've had some really great points, and perhaps my comments might align a bit more with Robbie's perspective and being a guest in a territory that is not the homelands of my traditional people. For me, I think it's really a true acknowledgement, and like Willie had mentioned, it's a nod to reconciliation. It's about acknowledging the First Peoples on whose land we're residing and working on, when that recognition wasn't there before. This wasn't a bare land when settlers first came into the area, and it's really repairing the harm and the ignorance and ignoring the traditional lands of the people. So I think it's a true step in reconciliation and simply acknowledging that we weren't or settlers and visitors weren't the first people here. And that comes a lot with the sincerity, and I think there is confusion about, is this something that we are required to do, or that as long as we say it, then we're done, you kind of check the box. And in that sense, it's so much deeper than that. If you really visit the reason why, or why I view the reason to be, is that reconciliation piece. So something is genuine as learning how to say hello, welcome, good morning, my name is, in the language of the people whose territory you're on, goes so much more towards reconciliation. It's a true acknowledgement, and it is something that will be very meaningful to the people.
Really good points, Jana. Thank you so much. That leads us on to our next topic, which is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was entered in 2015, and there's 94 recommendations from that document. One thing, what Jana pointed out is we don't want to always just check a box when we're doing land acknowledgements, and the importance of it coming from the heart and the importance of honor and respect. And so what does that look like? When you're looking, you could look at the document of the TRC, see the 94 recommendations, but how are you going to incorporate that into your day-to-day life? So rather than asking what is TRC, what are the 94 recommendations, how do we transform those recommendations into your daily life? So one example of that would be Jana's example, learning to speak the language, learning to say hello in the respective territory in which you're visiting. I think that's a really important step. Other ways that I could say is having patience, when you're visiting different spaces like the Gathering House, having patience when you're listening to stories or lessons from elders, asking them if they need a tea, asking them if they're hungry, asking questions when you don't know something, like about land acknowledgements. So that's a really important thing. So I'll pose that question to you all, is how do we incorporate the principles of the TRC into our day-to-day lives? Tina?
Thanks, Teresa. As you were talking, I was thinking about that. I feel really fortunate in the Office of Indigenous Education to work with everyone at TRU, work with all faculties, departments, divisions. And, when they look at the 94 calls to action and how it relates to their specific faculty and what they are doing, it looks so different across TRU. And, I think one of the biggest things that I see is a fear. People are afraid to ask questions, or they're afraid of mispronouncing something, or they're afraid that their question might seem silly. But honestly, there are no silly questions. And I say this all the time. I really appreciate people just reaching out and asking really honest questions, because that's a learning opportunity for me. It's a good gauge of what people know, and just that desire to do things differently or look at things differently or connect with an Indigenous community. You know, there's so many different nations within TRU's service area, and people don't know where to start. So that's why, you know, I find myself, you know, I feel really fortunate to be able to connect people at TRU with different communities, just to learn and bring people in from the communities to share, you know, their expertise and knowledge. So, yeah, thanks.
Great, thank you. Robbie, how do you think we can incorporate TRC in our day-to-day lives?
I think, yeah, that's a good question. I think it depends on who you are, but I think a lot of the points have been made. A long-term commitment to building relationships, and I think reading the TRC and trying to understand how you can put it into place in whatever spaces that you're in, workplace or school, classroom. I think that doing your own education, you know, building up your own capacity and your own education on different cultures, and especially the culture where you are, is important. And there's a lot of information on that. So, you know, doing some of the courses, or there's actually a presentation by BC Campus of some information on how frontline staff can support Indigenous students in a better way. So I think just making a commitment to taking those, you know, building up your own education, I think, is a good way.
Definitely. Thank you. Yeah, definitely read the document first and just see which one applies to you, whether you're a teacher or a nurse or even just a student on campus, a faculty member. Having that long-term commitment is really important, and building your own education to do so. One assignment that I was given before when I was in my undergrad at Simon Fraser University, an assignment we were given is to find out the origin of the street name you were on. So that was one thing where I started. When you don't know where to start, you know, what's your street name of your home address? Where does that name come from? What was it originally? When did it change? So those are some questions that I was asked to study when I was in my undergrad. And it was a really interesting exercise. It's definitely not as simple as you think. So thank you, Robbie, for that. Willie.
I think as we go down this path and you know, the implementation and how we bring the calls to action into our daily lives, I mean, it's a massive education that needs to happen. I look at you know, as we continue to go down this path and people are starting to define what reconciliation is. I remember having a higher level politician in my office, and they were asking me when reconciliation is going to be achieved, and I was telling them, well, you know, generations from now was my comment. I mean, I do believe that it could happen sooner, but the uptake from the general public is something that needs to happen, and it's a lot more than just land acknowledgements. I would recommend that anybody going into a territory to how you implement those calls to action is educate yourself on exactly whose territory you're in. I mean, I grew up in our public education system here, and you know, I was learning about the Cree or the Mi'kmaq or First Nations with teepees that are outside of our territory. And I wasn't necessarily learning about the First Nations that were in our territory. Williams Lake is a different beast. I mean, it's the traditional territory of the Secwepemc Nation of the Williams Lake First Nation. But you look at the surrounding area, there's 15 First Nation communities that range from Tekal to Chilcotin to Secwepemc. When you get further out towards the ocean, there's Newhalt territories that use Williams Lake as a hub. So, I mean, educating yourself on, you know, who uses the territory is a big part of how we implement those calls to action. You know, having a better understanding of who uses it and what First Nations you're going to be dealing with on a daily basis, and learning those welcomings and acknowledgements. It gets hard, and there's work to be done, but I mean, it wouldn't be reconciliation if it was easy. I mean, we live it every single day of our lives as First Nations people, whether you're urban or rural or on reserve or off reserve. It's just you need to be able to put the work in, and that's what we task every single non-First Nation and even First Nations person out there to start doing.
Thank you. Really great points there, Willie. Thank you so much. An important thing that I got from you talking is about how it will take generations from now for TRC to be achieved, or, when people ask for an endpoint and specific questions. And one thing that comes to mind for me is that the TRC document and the 94 recommendations, I see it as a living document. It's a living document that changes with the needs of Indigenous people across the country, the changes of society, and so on. So I think that's a really important point to make, is that it is a living document. Thank you. Kristen.
For me in my position, it is about learning about the different First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people that are within the Williams Lake area. And I say that all the time too, is that, Williams Lake is very unique. We do have 15 communities, 16 if you count Bella Coola, and 3 nations, 4 if you count Bella Coola, that are here. And I find that so important. And one of the things I did in my role was I created the TRU Education Advisory Committee. And, the one thing I wanted with that was to have their input on what they want to see, what they want here, what they want their students to have here, for anything from student services to events. Like, where do you think we're lacking? What do you think we need to do? Like, if you've gone to UBC, you've gone to University of Alberta or whatever, what are they doing that you want us to do? I just, having their inputs, having their different styles of what they want, right? It could even be something as, when I come here to see my students, can I get a Wi-Fi password? Like, can I go on Wi-Fi, or can I log into the computer? Stuff like that, just kind of helping them out. And some of the students that are from, not even from here, and they're from someone else, and they come in and, I'm like, oh, where are you from? And, I just kind of learn a little bit about them. And, it's just right now for me, it's just the little things, because I did grow up off reserve, and I didn't learn very much of my language until I was probably only like 10 years ago, and I'm still learning. And, it's right for me right now, it's just, learning about the different nations. And it's amazing how different people are. And like when I was getting my professional Aboriginal economic developer certification, going to all these different economic development conferences and get-togethers and whatnot, it was amazing to see all the different work, all the different First Nations in BC that had so much potential, so much that they did. And it was like, wow, like, this is so amazing. Like, why didn't we learn this in school? Like, how many different people, how many different nations are not only within my area, but like everywhere. Like, it's huge. And, just learning about the different people for me is kind of what I strive to do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. That's a really important point that you brought up there, Kristen, is about acknowledging the different styles of where you are and the student needs and all of the diversity of students that come to TRU's campuses across the different nations there. And one thing that I learned when I was at TRU and at SFU is when you go into those Indigenous spaces, you never know when you're going to see or meet your cousin. And so that happened a lot to me, where I would see people from my home territory, and it was so amazing, to see a familiar face when you're in an institution where it's not your home. So I definitely, relate to that a lot. Thank you so much.
The one thing I actually seen at the gathering place in Kamloops, and what I loved, is they have like this map of Canada, and they have the student pictures on one side, and then they have a string that has a thumbtack. They have that on there, and then they put the string, and then they put the other thumbtack where they're at or where they're from in Canada. I thought that was really cool, because it shows like all the different First Nation students that attend TRU in Kamloops, that where they all are. You'll see a whole bunch of them from like BC, and then you'll see a whole bunch like right across Canada, and it's like, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. I have found myself seeing if I recognized anybody on that map, and It's a really good visual to have for the space and a really creative way to get to know all of the students and where they're from. That was really great. Jana, why do you think we should, how do you think we can incorporate TRC into our daily lives?
Maybe kind of drawing on threads that everyone else has kind of brought up. I really think people need to be patient in their approach. We're not gonna, meet reconciliation in the next little while here. So, and part of that is allowing people space to tell their truths. And that's a very integral part to truth and reconciliation. And I think we also need to be respectful of people's own timing when they're ready to speak their truth. Like, not everyone, as soon as we say, okay, truth, go, it's not going to happen like that. So I think, we need to be patient. Our allies need to be patient with us and allow space for the truth to come out so we can build onto reconciliation afterwards.
Really good there, Jana. Patience is always a huge thing, really important value that we need to incorporate. And I remember mentioning this in our TRC days with the law school. I attended all 3 years, and that was a common theme that was always brought up, was about patience. And I definitely have to remind myself that all the time when I talk to my elders at home. For example, my uncle, I would ask him a question based on your example. Okay, let me hear your truth. Okay, 1, 2, 3, go. And I wouldn't do that, but I remember it would always be a moment of silence with my uncle, like a long moment of silence. And I don't know if he's hard of hearing sometimes, so I'd feel compelled to repeat myself, but actually he's just thinking. And so just learning to be patient and just sit and listen and not be in a rush. And so that's a really important piece. Thank you so much for that. So going on to our next question. And we've kind of touched on it a little bit, kind of leads us on to how can we as a society then continue learning about Indigenous people to repair the relationship? So we've touched on that a little bit on our last question about incorporating the TRC into our daily lives. I was wondering whether there were any further points on how we can repair that relationship. Something was mentioned earlier about reciprocity and, patience and having respect and honor when we're doing those land acknowledgements. Are there any other further points for this question of how do we repair the relationship? Tina?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, a lot of times, in meetings, I'm the only Indigenous person in the room, and people would call on me to do the territorial acknowledgement because, I was the only Indigenous person. And I felt like, and my response was, you know what, I will say it this once, but I want everyone in the room to take a turn saying the territorial acknowledgement, because that's a part of ownership and accountability. And, like when people do territorial acknowledgements, I love hearing people talk about their story, how they got to this space, why they moved, why their family moved to Kamloops, what their relationship is, in Kamloops with Tecumseh to Sequebin people, and how they interact with the local people here. So, that accountability piece is huge for owning your relationship here in this land. And what is your relationship with Sequebin people, for wherever you find yourself. Yeah, so that's what I was thinking. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Robbie?
I was trying to think of something to add, and I think that understanding the value that Indigenous people place on land is important, because I do think that it's different than the regular mainstream person in Canada. And I think understanding each, if you're doing a look at the different First Nations groups in your area, or if you're thinking about Métis people and what has happened in terms of land, there are different stories, right? So for Métis people, we had I guess there was I don't know a ton of detail about it, but I know my grandparents, they all had script documents that allowed them, they were given some of money to leave their farmed land, like this great land on the Red River. And then they were not able to find work and they were displaced. So I think that there's just a bigger story in terms of land. And I think if people understand the displacement that has happened, understand the connection that Indigenous people have to land, and then the disruption, that sort of is a underpinning for the whole story, right? So doing a land acknowledgement really, and thinking about the land makes people really connect the dots, I think, and to consider what the importance is of doing that land acknowledgement, understanding that story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. A really important point you brought up there was the connection and the disruption that happened to the land. And so when doing those land acknowledgements, it is important for that to be honored and respected, because a lot of many of our members and many Indigenous people across the country are living that reality from that disruption in terms of poverty, loss, grief, going through trauma, various forms of trauma. So that's also why it's really important to say it from the heart. So thank you for those points, Robbie. Willie.
Yeah, I think as we look at moving forward and how we move forward and downplaying the significance of what First Nations do to a region is a tough one for me. Like I'll use the Williams Lake First Nation as an example. I mean, we have millions of dollars worth of work going on in the territory, whether it's, our on reserve housing, or whether it's our new administration building, or cannabis retail and cultivation initiatives. I mean, those are massive investments to the region here in Williams Lake. And I would say embracing partnerships and collaborations with First Nation communities, and you start to realize the importance that First Nations not only have on the land, but have towards economic reconciliation, which is a whole other discussion that can be had. We have partnerships with both local mines here in Williams Lake. We work very extensively with proponents and bring partnerships on board, whether it's in regards to archaeology or civil construction or whatever it may be. But I mean, what we're doing is we're becoming a player in the region and showing the importance of what those partnerships can do for the health of that region. We understand, the economy here in Williams Lake, but we also understand there's another component to that discussion, which is, how do you find the environmental balance to that, to those initiatives? I mean, if people have to work, people have to make money to provide for their families, but we're also stewards to the land as First Nations people, and that's a very important part of the discussion to realize. People see the headlines of First Nations roadblocking major projects or wanting a bigger or to have more discussions or negotiations around the environmental repercussions of having a mine, let's say, for example, in the territory. But I mean, we're finding the balance of every single one of those discussions by putting people to work, but then also being stewards of the land. And the more that we embrace that First Nations are here to stay and we're going to be here forever after that mine site is closed or after that construction company moves on. I mean, it's not just the discussion around land, but it's the legacy of those companies in our territories and what benefits the First Nations seen from them, whether it's revenue shares or employment and training opportunities. And that legacy is also a key piece of the discussion, how we utilize our lands to the benefit of every single one of our members.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that. I definitely do agree having a strong business arm in the community is really important in building ourselves up. Having a strong economic reconciliation moving forward is really important, while also recognizing the work that we have as Indigenous people in being guardians to the land and ensuring that its health is always a priority. Thank you for that. Kristen.
I don't know. I was kind of thinking, like, what do I say? I think, education is really important. I know I read this this article about residential schools being taught in school, and this student brought home a report I think she had to do, and it was like, list some positive experiences that happened or whatever in residential school, and the mom was like enraged, and she brought it to the media and whatnot, and I was like, wow, like I wonder how they're teaching it, and like how should they be teaching it, and I found that just like, wow, just that one little thing, and it's like, wow, a lot of it is just, educate. We need to educate a lot of people about it. Like not only residential school, but there's day school too now, and yeah.
Education is definitely huge. A recognition and understanding the truth of the past is definitely important. And one thing that I think that sometimes we forget is also educating yourself on Indigenous success. There's a lot of successful Indigenous people in our country and across Turtle Island who are doing really great things, moving mountains, for our benefit and for our future. So that's another important piece. Thank you so much, Kristen. Dana.
Maybe one thing that I always think is an easy place to start if people are kind of piquing their interest about how do I learn more. I think museums are a fantastic place to start. Not only are you supporting the local museum, you pay your $2-3 or whatever the admission is, but you also get a pretty good basic understanding of the people in the area. I think we're very lucky here in Kamloops to have that Kamloops-Tisquam also hosts the Museum and Heritage Park. That is a fantastic place to go, but even the museum in downtown Kamloops, if you start there, the archives are fantastic. They have books that you can not even purchase anymore to learn about history, and also for other community connections to discover who are the Indigenous stakeholders in the area.
Definitely. Going to museums is always fun. I will recommend to bring a friend. Always bring a friend, have a conversation, get some coffee and tea, make a day out of it. One thing that I challenge sometimes is bring a friend to something and then ask them questions and get them to bring that conversation to their dinner table at their home. How are we continuing that conversation? Really important. Thank you, Jenna. So just being cognizant of our time here, I wanted to have a final wrap-up question for everybody is how can we celebrate? It'll be a 2-in-1 question. So how can we celebrate, commemorate, or acknowledge Indigenous Awareness Week? And then the second question will be, what are some educational or cultural books, films, podcasts, or any resources that you'd recommend to anyone listening or anybody in your circle, whether it be a colleague, a friend, family member? What kind of resources can you recommend to others? Tina?
Thanks, Teresa. I was thinking, visit my website, Office of Indigenous Education. If you go to TRU's homepage, there's an Indigenous link at the top, and then click on my office. I've put tons of resources, Sequebin language, and there's just a ton of information on there for people to have a look at. Attend TRU events, TRU Indigenous cultural events like Orange Shirt Day or the June 21st National Indigenous Peoples Day celebrations, on campus or at downtown at Riverside Park or over at Kamloops at the Arbor. Every year there's different events going on across Canada and Kamloops, and the different bands have different great celebrations. So yeah, definitely attend some community events, TRU events. Watch the Stephen Harper apology from 2008. That started the TRC 94 calls to action were a result of that apology, and putting the onus back on people to take that reconciliation into their own hands. And what does that mean for me as an individual? What does that mean for me in the workplace? So just thinking about it in those terms. And yeah, have a look at UNDRIP and the 94 calls to action itself, or check out the Indigenous Services Canada website as a good place to start, learning about First Nations, Métis, Inuit in Canada. And yeah, just ask questions, never be afraid to ask questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Tina. Robbie?
So I think Tina said, given a big list. I'm reading this book right now. It's probably backwards in there. But The Northwest is Our Mother, and it's by a Métis lawyer, actually. And I'm learning things that I didn't know about my ancestors. But yeah, I think it's important to to, like Teresa said, celebrate authors and Métis and Indigenous First Nations and Inuit authors, and ensure that we're thinking of all of the positive things too. Because I know some of the conversation has, pointed out some of the negatives. But yeah, there are a lot of people doing amazing things and writing good books. There's a lot of books on medicines and medicinal plants. So many things we can learn from our ancestors and Indigenous people.
Thanks, Robbie. Thank you. Willie?
What was the first part of the question, sorry?
The first part of the question was, how can we celebrate, commemorate, or acknowledge Indigenous Awareness Week?
Yeah, I mean, sharing and spreading the word on social media and to loved ones is, I think, first step. I mean, we're kind of living in this social media world with all these different platforms for communication. I mean, it's really actually shown me that, how much travel I actually need to do as a chief, and what can be done from the safety of, our downtown office or my home. But again, getting it out there, of course, people love phone calls, and they love to have those face-to-face conversations, which are definitely challenging in today's day and age. Some books that I've read and are really good when we have that, when we have the discussion around honoring, Aboriginal authors and Indigenous authors. Of course, my best-selling children's book, Dipping with Dad, would be a good start for everyone. I also have another book coming out this year, Hockey with Dad, which I'm very excited about. But on a more serious note, I mean, take a look at Bev Sellers' two books. They Called Me Number One, and also Price Paid. It explores racism and reconciliation. It gives you a firsthand experience of her time at the St. Joseph's Mission, St. Joseph's Residential School, which is located actually just 6 or 7 kilometers from our main community of WLFN, which is Iron Number 1 Sugarcane Reserve. You put into perspective a lot of the trauma and hurt and grief that's going on in our communities, whether it's firsthand experiences at residential school or else it's intergenerational trauma that is filtered through even a young person like me. My dad went to residential school, and he went to residential school just down the street. And I always think, like, I try and go out there once a month or so and just reflect and kind of get a little bit grounded. And I always think in my head, I have 3 kids. Could you imagine the mindset that I'd be going through if my 3 kids were yanked from me and they're now in a school that bad things are happening and I can't do anything about it, and they're literally a 1-minute drive away. So Bev Sellers, really good. I mean, Orange Shirt Day Story by Phyllis Webstad, also really good. She's got 2 books out, both a children's and more of an informational book. Really good. Educate yourself and, get a better understanding of what First Nations people have been through to understand how we're going to heal and how you can help in that healing process is going to be the key messaging, I think.
Great. Thank you so much for those recommendations. Kristen?
For how we would celebrate the Indigenous Awareness Week? Well, I actually attended the SAGE workshop that one of the TRU Indigenous mentors did yesterday, and I thought that was pretty cool. I didn't actually know a lot of the stuff that she was talking about. You know, I smudge and whatnot, but just, you know, learning a different perspective from a different First Nation was really interesting. And they actually did was it pine needle tea, I think it was. I was going to check it out and I haven't gotten it yet, but Elizabeth has a Facebook page. I think it's TRU Cultural, and I can't remember, it was something about cultural in it anyway, but she's a cultural coordinator for TRU, and she's doing an amazing job with TRU's Indigenous Awareness Week this week. And yeah, it's very informational, and I can't wait to check out that tea one. So the other one, because I am Chilcotin War of 1864, there's a few books out of there. We do not know him, Tlatastain or Tlatacine. People call him Tlatacine. You know, just learning the history on that. I mean, it was huge that the Prime Minister, you know, made exonerated our chiefs. Like, and for us, like, that's the first thing we learned as Chilcotin people, is that the government lied to us. The government led us into saying that we were going to talk, that we were going to have peace talks, but they ended up getting tried and charged for, you know, murder, for war, you know, for all this stuff that, you know, they thought they were just going in for peace talks. And, you know, it's a great story, you know, and it's the first thing we learn when we're growing up. And, you know, it was an emotional day, just even watching it, watching Justin Trudeau exonerate our chiefs. And then he actually came out to Namaya and he exonerated them right in our territorial entitled land. So that was pretty cool. So just, you know, kind of learning about that. Like, for me, that's important because I am Chilcotin, and that is a big part of my history. And yeah, and one of the movies I would recommend is That We Were Children. That one as well. I think I only watched half of it, and then I had to turn it off because I was just like, wow. And then I had to, I think it took about a week for me to finish the other half, but it's a really good movie. And I can't remember the other one. It had something with horse in it.
Indian horse.
There we go. Yeah, that one's a good one too.
A good book and movie. Very good. Thank you so much. I watched We Were Children as well. Very, very powerful. Thank you so much, Kristen. Jana, what would you recommend for material or resources?
I think an exercise in recognition of Indigenous Awareness Week that I've been doing in my own home. I have a 10-year-old who has dreams of being the world's best artist on earth, and I feel like we're, you know, exploding out of the yin-yang with paint and glitter. I can't stand glitter when I'm like listening everywhere with her artwork. But one exercise that we've been doing lately is trying to visualize what our immediate home space would look like if our house disappeared. Like, what did the land look like before all of this infrastructure? And, you know, we get a good giggle out of it because we live in an apartment building. So it's like, well, if it disappeared, would we be standing on top of the people who live downstairs, or who would be on top of us? And when you think of, you know, shrinking things in that space, how we all could spread out and make room for each other, or to go out for a walk and respect each other's, you know, personal bubble space, or what does this person need to survive in this area. So that's something we've been doing. We've been drawing pictures of our favorite landscapes and trying to get out into nature. So I guess I'm perhaps glad that it's warmed up and some of the snow has melted and we've been able to go outside. But one of my favorite resources that I've come across lately is a podcast by Métis Cree lawyer Myrna McCollum about, it's called The Trauma-Informed Lawyer. And it's really an excellent resource for people interested or involved in the service industry of any kind. And not only does it help inform people about how to deal with trauma if you are a service provider, but also how to avoid vicarious trauma as well. And I think that's an important thing when you're dealing with high-risk clients that bring trauma into your workplace.
So great. Thank you, Jenna. I haven't heard of that book, so I'll have to jump on that. as I start my pandemic lawyering career up in the north. Really great resources, everybody. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed all of your guys' talking points. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know we can go on and on. There were still more questions that we could have explored, but I really liked how sharing on social media, Willie, about that, and you know how we're in a different time right now, and talking on the phone is really good for the soul. You know, when you're catching up with family or friends, talking about Indigenous Awareness Week, or you know, just simply catching up with your home. Social media platforms are huge these days. Some resources that I wanted to recommend for everybody is watching the Grizzlies movie. Indian Horse was already mentioned, and also the documentary on Colton Bushi, We Will Stand Up. I believe that's on the National Film Board website. And there's also a new film out for Spirit Bear, and that one's on the Caring Society, a little film for all ages. And a book that I would recommend would be The Reconciliation Manifesto by the late Arthur Manuel. Really, really great read. Yeah, there's so many more that we could mention. Rupert Ross is another really great author. Thomas King, he does a lot of things on CBC Unreserved. Much, much more. Thank you guys so much for all taking the time to talk about this today, land acknowledgements. I'm really happy that you guys were all able, and I will see you all later at 5 o'clock. Thank you.